I'm having a tough time spotting these addicts because I didn't know so many people had this problem with like drug addiction being a huge problem. Like I know it's widespread and it's a global thing. Like drug addictions are everywhere. There are legal forms of drugs, which is nicotine and alcohol and some sort of many forms of medicated drugs from pharmacies. So like if you get prescribed any sort of like medication from a doctor, that's still considered a drug, except most people wouldn't be prescribed that for a long time and they wouldn't continue to take the medication after the medication says only take as much as prescribed. um like a pharmacist would know a lot more about those types of drugs, but I'm not really sure if they would. I think doctors would know a lot more about it than pharmacists, to be honest. But again, there's different types of doctors who specialize in different types of things, and typically they don't have access to, I think, all. They might actually, I'm not sure. Maybe if somebody who like loves being a doctor and just does doctor stuff all the time. um but what I wanted to say was that, oh my god, be careful of brain injuries. If you'd had a significant brain trauma, make sure you're at rest for at least 6 months. You need to be on bed rest or something for like 6 months. Like, don't injure yourself and don't overexert yourself. And always focus on relaxation. But anyway, what else? Yeah, drugs. Um, how to spot a heroin addict? I think the easiest way, like the surefire way of telling a heroin addict, just by like their behavior. Like if you first meet somebody, you're not gonna be able to tell right away. But if you're friends with that person and they continually treat you as a stranger despite the fact that you guys are friends, that's a heroin addict. It's hard to spot at first because with heroin addicts, like if you meet somebody for the first time, you don't know them very well, like obviously it might be a little awkward. That's not like too unusual. It might be like some people have a longer warming up to period than others, so that might be also a thing. But like for heroin addicts, like they will never understand that this person next to them is a friend. Like they don't know who their friends are. They treat everybody like strangers except for their family members. So only people that they get along with are family members, and if they're not blood related, then like they don't care about that person. Also, they take everything really personally, like to an unreasonable degree. Like if somebody said an offhand remark towards me and it was really mean, I'd still be upset, but it would be like if somebody says something reasonable towards me and it was a criticism based on something I've done, then it's not unreasonable, right? There's a reason why they're saying that, which is like, what would it be? Like if somebody said like I was smoking outside and they said a comment about like smoking is unhealthy or whatever, then I would feel, well, obviously like I wouldn't feel so good about myself, right? But they're right, smoking is a bad thing, right? But if you said that to a heroin addict, they will actually like either they will find ways to damage your property later, or they will actually like go out of their way to like physically hurt you. And they think it's self-defense. Typically heroin addicts, they will be the ones instigating this type of like offensive behavior. So they're the one, they'll start stealing and lying to the people they know, and then from people they know and to people they know, and then they'll start like, what else, like they'll start like they'll start to stop listening to what the person has to say, whether or not it's reasonable or not. Like they are in their own little world and they refuse to listen to reason, and they refuse to listen to anything that's not associated with the drug use. That's it. Like, if it doesn't have anything to do with heroin and the um procuring of said heroin, then they will not listen to it. They don't want anything to do with it. Like, and then if you actually try to talk to them about anything, like, they will actually physically assault you prior to, like, verbally assaulting you. So it will be repeated bouts of sexual harassment, which is verbal assault, technically. And then when you tell them that it's inappropriate, they'll physically assault you. That's typical heroin addict behavior. I don't know if that's typical of any addicts. Um, I think the thing about heroin addiction is that it's not physically noticeable. Like, with alcohol, you can smell it off that person. With meth, you can also smell it. As well as crack use, like, you can see the deterioration in their physical health from the use. But with heroin, it's not super noticeable. I mean, it gets to a point where it gets really obvious. But prior to that, it's not like super obvious. Um, how to spot a smoker? It's like they do things that, like, you know that they shouldn't be doing, and then they like make up like some sort of weird reason for it, like nicotine addicts, like people who shouldn't be smoking but are smoking anyway. I don't know how to spot any other alcoholics. I think are easy to spot. Like, you can see it in their implications. They're always implying something bad about another person. And they're typically very angry. Like, anger is their default setting. And it takes them a while to actually, like, listen and take into consideration what their behavior is doing and how it's affecting other people. And also with alcoholics, I think it's rare that you see an alcoholic sober. Alcoholics typically don't ever become sober for an extended period of time. So you can see that person without a drink for maybe a week or a month, but they'll be drinking a few times a year. Still an alcoholic. So there's that. Oh, also with heroin, they can see some pretty fucked up shit and it doesn't affect them whatsoever. And they don't have any, like, trauma from being exposed to that kind of stuff. Like, like a neurotic sensation. Like, when you see somebody get shot on the street, like, that would shock you. Right? But heroin users, it doesn't shock them. It's just kind of like they're like, oh, this is normal. Like, obviously that'll happen if you get shot or something. But with normal people, they'd be really shocked. They'd be like they'll almost be frozen on the spot. But with heroin addicts, like, they just consider it like a daily normal thing, which is maybe a reason why, like, a lot of third world countries typically are using heroin, because there's a lot of fucked up stuff going on, and a normal person might even, like, be overwhelmed with the stress of it, and they won't be able to get along with the people who are, like, a part of those types of things. And then, like, injecting heroin or consuming heroin, like, numbs them to that effect, and then they're able to get along with said people, or they accept it as, like, it's fine, like, it happens sometimes. I'm only saying this is a problem because I've never seen a person who smokes a lot of marijuana go insane and, like, start hating everyone when they're told something. And I've never seen well, crackheads, yeah, and meth addicts, yes, and heroin users, yes. And with alcoholics, sometimes, if they're actually that type of person to do that to begin with. That's the thing about alcohol. So if you're, like, a type of person to be, like, raging at people and, like, become physically violent without any provocation, but just, like, no threat to their safety, right? They're angry at somebody, so that's enough of a reason for them to lash out at somebody physically. Like, if you're that type of person, then you're gonna be like that when you're drunk. It would be harder to suppress those, like, I guess it's like you lose your self-control, like your discipline while you're drinking. So, like, if you're sober, you would be able to suppress it. You'd still be really angry, but you don't go that far. With alcoholics, they tend to not have that like filter, so they just like go all the way. When they wouldn't, if they were sober, they wouldn't have done that. Even though they could have, they wouldn't have. That's the difference. But yeah, it doesn't actually cause like people to, it doesn't change your actual wiring in their brain or their social patterns. Whatever an alcoholic would do while they're drinking is something they would have done sober, except it only affects their mood and their perception in relating to other people, but that doesn't change themselves or their DNA or their brain chemistry, whereas those drugs do, like crack and meth and heroin does change your brain chemistry, and I think cocaine as well. And people who huff paint and like those household chemicals and the cleaners and stuff, yeah, there's people who do that to get high. Oh my god. But like that's what that's like, it's like, but I was like, there's no way that like there's like so many drug addicts. Like how are they like how come the drug dealers aren't in prison? Like they must be making a lot of money or something. Like I don't, this is kind of weird. Like it's just, I don't know, it's like this is like, I don't, like obviously I've drank before and I've partied, but like that was when I was young. Like when I got older, I just kind of realized it was kind of like, it's unacceptable to behave that way. I mean, it was acceptable for me to be like that, even if I wasn't drunk when I was, I don't know, 17, 18, 19, right? 20, 21, 22, 23. But then you start approaching 23, right? 22 is kind of like an iffy thing. You're 23 now, and you're just like, oh. The 24 is just kind of like, And then 25, definitely not. And then 26 is just like, you're still on that. Like, you're still doing that. So that's like, yeah. That was the... But I've noticed that like not a lot of people think that way. I guess maybe because like they're drinking a lot and like they drink to like kind of, they're drugging themselves, like self-medicating to ease the pain of being involved in things that they don't want to be involved in or something. I don't know. It just sounds like an excuse, to be honest. But yeah, that's how you spot a heroin addict and meth addict. So maybe I should redo this.